I'll start with what Lisa said around culture. I don't think any of the things that we're going to try to get accomplished collectively or on our own are going to be able to be done unless we have the right mindset, and the right mindset is supported by the right culture. And culture isn't something in a box. It's not something on a book. It's informed by people. And contrary to what some people may believe, it doesn't start at the bottom and comes up. It starts at the top and comes down. It's good if it comes in both directions, but people generally look up toward their leaders. And if they don't see their leaders exercising the values that's consistent with what they say, it's going to create a disconnect. So as leaders, we have to go ahead and be able to implement, set, and drive the right culture. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Austin Energy. I have to do the commercial for Austin Energy, or I wouldn't be doing my job. Talk about some strategic areas of focus and a number of other things. So, but before I get started, I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to throw out a number and somebody tell me what it is. 2007, 7 million. I'm a utility guy, and we're in a digital summit talking about smart cities. 2007, 7 million. Anybody want to take a guess as what that is? Right, it's the number of smart meters that was on the scene. This year, anybody have any idea how many there may be out there? Probably well over 80 million. I'm going to come back to that. I want you to think about that for a minute, because when we talk about smart, the general notion of smart is meaning that you know something, right? And in order to know something, you have to have an input, and that's why those meters are important, and it's going to be kind of a theme when we talk about some other things. So Austin Energy, our nation's third largest municipal electric utility. We bill for all the city of Austin, including several other city services. We handle the 311 calls, everything except emergencies. I don't know how well you can read this graph, but pretty much the area, this is point of work, and here is where Austin Energy is. The vast majority of our revenue is within the city limits. I think about 15% of our customers and roughly 15% of our revenue come from outside. We're basically a full service utility. We own and operate power plants. We have electric and we have transmission and distribution infrastructure. We have meters, we have customer service representatives. So we're basically, in terms of structure, what you would think of a utility long before deregulation. I'm not going to go into too much of this, but at $1.4 billion in revenue, about 485,000 customers. Now this number in today's age is very misleading. Can anybody take a guess as to why? Well, even if it weren't meters, even if it were people, why is it misleading? It begs the question, who is the customer? If this is meters or premises or homes, on average 2 to 2.5, maybe 3 people for each one. So we're probably providing electric service to well over 1 million people. We tend to think of it in the old terms of customers or meters, but we have to expand our thinking. As you think about a smart city, you think about everybody in that city who live there or come and go. We need to think about it this way as a utility or service provider. I'm not going to get into the other stuff, except we couldn't get any of that stuff done without our close to 1,800 employees or team members. We need to change that slide. I don't even like the term employees. I think team members is better. How do we do it? Most of you all know it, but for those of you who don't, there's a market here in Texas where most of the utilities and energy providers participate. ERCOT, there are a few people in the far western part of the state, and I think a few on the extreme east that don't, but for the most part, ERCOT is where all the energy is bid into a system. We extract energy from that system. It goes over all this infrastructure and eventually gets to these customers. Now, this is what I'm most proud of. About 380,000 homes, close to 1 million people, 596 schools, hospitals, police stations, fire stations, and businesses. And when I tell anybody who joins the utility industry, because it's generally thought of as being non-sexy, it's not Apple, it's not Google, it's not Cisco, but those businesses right now can't do anything without electricity. And when I try to explain to people who work for utility, is when you fly in or drive by a school or a hospital, you should feel proud of the fact that you're working in a business that's making it possible for people in these boxes to get done what they do every day in their lives. So, we're talking about smart cities. We're gonna I'm an interactive kind of guy, and there's a difference between what you do and what you're trying to accomplish. So I'm going to call it the means, the enabler, and the end game part of this presentation. So why smart city? Anyone? We're here talking about smart cities and this big university collaboration. Why? Hold that thought. Exercise. Who in here exercises? Why?
Yeah, better. Help.
Why? Exactly. It's the difference. You don't build a smart city just to build a smart city. It's something you're trying to enable and it's an end game. Let's do another one. Plane. Why do you take a plane? Why? Now, someone put wisdom. Think about that for a minute. Telephone. Speak up, we're all friends here. Accessibility. Why? To connect. Change methodology. How many change agents in the room? Okay. Why do you change?
Improve.
Good. And once you get the improvements, you get the satisfaction you want. Are we gonna make these slides available? You don't need to go get you this.
If you want.
You know.
Absolutely.
Anyone? I can't hear you.
Alignment.
Confidence,
There you go.
right? Now, why did I do this? Because, as one of the speakers said, these things are notions. Obviously, these aren't the right answers. Always it depends. But I want us to start thinking about why we're doing what we're doing. Are we building a smart city just to build smart cities? Are we installing smart meters just so we can say we have smart meters? If you're an accountant in a company, do you exist just to be an accountant or are you existing for some other reason? And what I try to do, and what I think I would challenge us to do collectively as we work through what we want to do, is always ask that simple question: what is the end objective? What are we trying to achieve? And is what we're trying to achieve what the people for whom we're trying to achieve it, what they want? Now, coming from an IOU space, I can tell you, and also here exactly in the municipality, there's a governance structure in the IOU space in terms of who approves a utility's ability to raise their rates. It's basically called a Public Service Commission. And a lot of municipalities, it's called a city council. And both of those groups generally think that they are representing the customer. But I would suggest to you that if you poll the average customer and you see what their wants and needs are relative to what those governing bodies are directing utilities to do, many times they're different. At a minimum, they are articulated differently. And if they're articulated differently, they can be interpreted differently and you can come up with a different result. So we need to get alignment of purpose and alignment for what we're doing and why we're trying to do it. So, the enabler. That socket that all of that energy flows through and this connection that all that data flows through enables a lot of the things that was on the previous screen that people want. And as a utility, with a desire to partner with universities, I want to talk to you about what we're doing to kind of get along that path. So I asked the question earlier, who is the customer? And I think that's ever and ever more relevant. Because a lot of times, again, for tech people and business people like us, we have a vision, but we may not necessarily have matched our vision to what our customers' needs are. We know that customers want customization sometimes, they want flexibility sometimes, and they want knowledge, especially during periods of uncertainty. So one of the lessons that I learned around about 2008, 2009, we went through a very, very bad period of reliability in the Mid-Atlantic. I was on the news every night for about 10 days, local news, explaining all the issues. And one of the things that the utility thought was important was getting the lights back on. Can anybody tell me what they think is equally as important? Exactly. It's the knowledge of knowing when the lights are going to come back on. Now, I was on the news every night because I was the customer senior executive at the time, and generally, customers don't care about electricity. I'm going to say that again. It may be shocking to many of you to have an electric executive stand and tell you that customers don't care about electricity. There's a semicolon after that. On the other side of that is except when it's not there. I want you to think about that, because we tend to think about reliability and building stuff and customers don't care. The same way none of you in this room cares about breathing, except when you can't catch your breath. And the reason for that is that you've been breathing since you were born, and it's just natural and expected. We've done such a good job in this industry that when you hit the lights, for the most part, they're there. So it's no big deal to a customer that you're reliable. They expect that. It's when you're not that's the issue. And when you're not, it's the knowledge. I want to know why. Well, why do you want to know why? Because I may have to make plans. If you're going to be out for 4 hours, we may stay home and tough it out. If you're going to be out for 12 hours, we may go to a hotel or a restaurant. As a matter of fact, we set a goal one time on something called ETRs, estimated time of restoration, and we used to incent senior leaders and managers, if you get your estimated time of restoration, if you beat it, you'll get bonuses, blah, blah, blah. So what kind of behavior do you think that drove? People sandbag. Oh, we're getting back into 16 hours. We come back in 2. Well, isn't that a good thing, Charles? We under-promised and over-delivered? No, because the information was bad and people couldn't plan. So customers need customization, flexibility, and they need knowledge during times of uncertainty. We talk a lot about Generation Ys or Millennials and Generation Zs, and these are very kind of like broad things to think about, but the behavioral characteristics are a little bit different, and people seek different things. And the reason I'm talking about these kind of social things is, for one, I fancy myself a closet psychologist, even though I've only taken 2 classes in college years ago. But secondly, when you're really into customers, you really want to understand how people think. So when I started working back in 1989, my boss said to me on the first day, "Here, read this book." It's about 400 pages. "If you do a good job, you'll be like me one day." And I'm thinking, I don't want to be like you, right? But that's kind of how we process the world. Here's another axiom that I just totally reject. Treat people as, that's really bad advice. People may not want to be treated the way you want to be treated. So you should treat people as they want to be treated. All right. So this engineering stuff doesn't tickle my fancy, even though I am one. I like the people side of things. So what are we doing? Our strategic focus, Austin Energy, customers. We're doing AMI upgrades. I want to pause and talk about AMI. Does anybody in here not know what AMI means? So it means automatic meter infrastructure. Now, why is that important? So let me take you back. There's an old saying we say in the utility industry that if Thomas Edison were resurrected today, the utility infrastructure would look almost the exact same to him today as it looked 100 years ago. Or for those of you who are more steeped in this business, Nikola Tesla, it doesn't make a difference. For the most part, that's true. There's some device somewhere generating electricity. It goes over some wires. We do some changes to it because it's too high from where we created it, and we do something called step it down and go to your house and you make a difference. How do you bill for that? We put a meter there, and you generally bill on 30-day increments. Now, for almost 100 years, we didn't know what happened in that 30 days, because the way it works is you put a meter there, and it's a beginning reading, and let's just say on day 1, the meter read 1, and then you come back and you read it on day 30, and let's say it reads 100. We technically did not know if you used 100 units all on day 1, or you used them all on day 30, or you used them evenly throughout. All we knew that there was a difference between what we read at the beginning and the end, and we sent you a bill. So when we send you a bill, what are your options? Thank you, pay it or not. Now, I've been in this industry for 30 years. I've been an executive for about 17, and I spoke all around the country, and you would not believe how many utility executives go, "Oh no, there's more than 2 options." Such as, well, you can give them a prepayment plan. It's just a form of payment. You could do authorized debit transfer from their bank account. That's a form of payment. Under the old construct, customers only have 2 choices. They could either pay the bill or not. And the reason that existed is because we had the old meters. Now with AMI meters, we can interrogate those meters once every 15 minutes, and in some cases, once every 5 minutes. And my VP of my electric system is here, Dan, how much of the street are we now? Once every minute? How often can we interrogate the meters now?
Yeah, we interrogate every minute.
Every minute. Now, how does that change the world in terms of customers and the things I've been talking about? Now, if I can interrogate that meter every minute, during the middle of that 30-day cycle, I can interrogate that meter. I can look at how much that customer used, and if it was Lisa, I could say, Lisa, you wanted to spend $300 a month on your electricity. It's the middle of the month, you're already at $200. If you keep using at the rate you're using, you're gonna exceed your budget. Now she has what? Actionable information, something that can help her make a decision. Remember, customers want flexibility and they want to know about things, they're uncertain. And under the old construct, they're not certain how much they use until you read the meter at the end. That's why that's important. So we're focusing on that. Small cell deployment, because again, it's the next generation of telecommunications, and historically utilities haven't been flexible enough to be able to deal with that, and we're focusing on that as strategic assessment, a strategic thrust, and then there's customer reliability assessments, because if the infrastructure isn't working, we can't get the electrons to flow from the source of generation to where they go. But we're extremely environmentally conscious here. So we're reducing our fossil fuel. And this is important when you think about in terms of smart cities, because as you start co-locating generation sources a lot closer to where people are using them, and you're using generation sources that are less carbon-based, it's gonna have a significant impact on the need for fossil fuel, and it will help us hasten the reduction in the fossil fuel that we rely on. Now, Austin Energy, like most utilities, are not anti-environmental, but there's some balances that must happen. If we shut down all the fossil fuel plants right now, we would have a significant disruption in the reliability of the nation, let alone any particular area. So we're gonna have to continually step up non-carbon sources of generation while we step down carbon sources of generation. And it's not just about the supply, the value of the smart city, the things that we need to collaboratively think about is how can we overall reduce the reliance and the need to have as much energy to get the same things done. And as we do that, that's gonna be another method by which we reduce the reliance on carbon and increasing our renewable portfolios. We're really big on the community. Now, the difference between the customer and the community from a utility person's perspective is the system. Engineers tend to think of the entire system, and the customers tend to think of themselves. So you'll hear an engineer or utility executive say, we're very reliable. And you go, well, how do you measure that? And then I'll throw out acronyms. We have a SAIDI of this and a SAFE of that, and those things talk about the system. Customers don't care about your system. They care about what? At home. I don't care if you're 99.99% reliable in the system. If that 0.001% happens to be me all the time, what difference does it make? So we talk about the community and the system, and we talk about the customers. And finally, the reason why Andreas invited me here with all you smart people is to talk about how we're modernizing the grid. And I'm gonna go through that in a little bit. But before I do, I wanna give you some viewpoints about some things. This is pretty significant. So this is electricity generation from selected fuels from 2010 to 2050 projected out. And these things are called wedge charts. For me, they're kind of hard to read here. But you'll see this natural gas is beginning to pick up, and you'll see that the coal is starting to come down, which is a good thing. When you look at it from a solar perspective, look at the trajectory of how the solar is going to be picking up in projection in 2050. There's this thought that solar could wind up being almost half of the source of the energy that's generated, which is fantastic because it's renewable, at least by most projections, for another 1 billion years. And it's not carbon-based, and that's good. But why is that significant? The reason it's significant is when the system was designed 100 years ago, and for the most part, how the system is designed today, it was designed for one-way electric flow. It was designed for energy to flow from a central plant out to customers. But now with distributed energy, of which solar is going to wind up being a more significant contributor, energy will flow in multiple directions. And one of the challenges of a smart city, and you can't have a smart city without a smart utility, is how we're going to balance that flow so that I could say, hey, I've used energy, but I've stored some excess. I want to sell some to Andreas, point the person. Right now, that doesn't exist. But I envision a time where that's going to happen pretty soon, because that's where the market is going to drive us. I gave you all the statistics at the beginning. Roughly 7 million meters less than 12 years ago, 80 million and counting now. And again, it's significant because with that data, the utilities and smart city people can do all sorts of things. They don't have to guess as much. We can definitively know how much energy people are using. Now remember I told you, we tend to look at what? The system. And the reason we looked at the system is because we didn't have this type of discrete data 20 years ago. But now instead of saying how much energy is being used by a substation or how much is used by a particular line that we call a feeder, we can determine how much energy is being used by a home. Why significant? Well, there's something that's hit the road. Anybody want to guess what it is? Come on, you guys, work with me with the play on words. There's something on the road. Exactly. And these electric vehicles can store and discharge significant amounts of energy. And if they're going to be plugged into and discharge or pulling energy from homes, without this discrete data, it's hard for us to best manage the system, and it's hard to build a smart city. So I'm going to skip that slide because I know I tend to go over, but I want to show you all. This is significant. So this is electric vehicles on the road. Look at 2011, almost 1 million in 9 years. Just look at that adoption rate. Look at Austin. In just 2 years. So we have a requirement to say, how do we best enable this? Because people aren't going to buy electric vehicles if they can't charge them. And they're also not going to buy electric vehicles if they can only charge it at their home, because what happens when you go out and you're not home, you can't get back. So one of the things we did in terms of further facilitating and perpetuating this drive toward digital is we did something that generally is illegal in most parts of the country. But it wasn't illegal for us to do it because we got it mandated by law. Did any of you know that if I came to your house with my electric shaver and plugged it up and used it, that's perfectly fine? But if you said, Charles, you can plug in your electric shaver, but I'm going to charge you, that's against the law in most parts of the country. You cannot resell electricity without authorization from some type of governmental agency. And what Austin Energy did to help facilitate this is we got a special rate enabled to allow people to resell electricity so that they could set up charging stations so that we can have certain rates so that people can charge their cars. Because what we're trying to do is to help facilitate the proliferation of electric vehicles. Now, we're not doing this just because we're altruistic. There's value for the utility to allow people to charge electric vehicles. There's value for people to use them. One, the city of Austin has a climate initiative where we want to reduce the carbon. So if we have more electric vehicles on the road, less industrial combustion engine, internal combustion engines, it's helping toward that objective. Two, to the extent that we're able to better help facilitate charging, we could start thinking about how do we strategize around that and begin to look at using that charging to help us with the system. So we ultimately want to be able to have plug-in everywhere network where people can charge at different levels, different rates, different speeds, and I'm not going to go into all the details of that. But right now, and I thought this was pretty impressive, I think the first week I met Dan, he took me on a tour, and he had an electric vehicle at the time, and he gave me a rate of like $4 something a month. That's pretty cheap to charge your vehicle. You know, I don't think you're going to be able to get that type of rate at your home out just generally. So for a flat rate of about just a little over $4 a month, you have unlimited charging. Just imagine that. That's kind of like telling you that for $4 a month, you can get gas anywhere. Just think about it, right? Because at the end of the day, remember my means versus end slide? The electricity just gives you the end game of being able to move your car. So does the gas. So if we're giving you $4 a month to be able to charge your battery, it's the equivalent of giving you paying a flat $4 a month to be able to gas up anywhere you want. Only it's cleaner. That's pretty significant. And we are planning to install up to 35 DC fast charging stations over the next 2 years. which means these DC chargers, the fast chargers, I think, can charge in like an hour, 2 hours. Don't quote me, I should have known that off the top of my head. Less. That's why Dan follows me around to keep me straight. Now, this is something that's near and dear, because it's kind of a microcosm of what you all are doing here. How am I doing on time? I'm almost done. Good. Do I get a book? Do I get a book? Okay, all right. All right, so we have this SHINES project that we're doing, sustainable and holistic integration of energy storage and solar, but it's more than that. I think it's a cute name. It's a little bit of a misnomer because we're basically testing and piloting a number of technologies individually in an integrated fashion to see what might be the best combination of how you deploy these to further advance smart cities, smart usage. So driving customer value in energy services. You can read this. We are proactively addressing customers' desires, and I want you to keep this at the forefront of everything you do through this conference and when you leave. This is not about smart cities or smart utilities for the sake of having smart utilities and smart cities. Actually, improving the culture of an organization shouldn't be done solely for the purpose of improving the culture. You should always say, what is the end objective? What are we trying to accomplish? Because you may be trying to accomplish one thing and want one culture, and if you're trying to accomplish something totally different, you may need a different type of culture. The same way, if you're trying to enable people to have more autonomy and how to use their energy, and you're trying to make the area more resilient, then you may want to take a different tack. But at the end of the day, we're trying to look at the relationship and analysis between storage, how you impact the environment, and how you use energy. I wrote a paper back in 2014 that was published in Public Utilities Fortnightly that basically kind of touched this notion that once the storage gets to the point where it's a commodity, it's going to fundamentally change your electric business. I'm in a muni now, but from an IRU perspective, you should be scared if you're an IRU executive, because the basic premise of an IRU is that you get paid for stuff, steel in the ground. Don't let anybody tell you anything different. That's the fundamental way an IOU makes earnings. As you become more and more smart and more distributed, you're going to have less steel in the grounds, and so your earnings trajectory is going to be shifted, unless the regulatory model changes where you get paid for services. And I told you all at the top, customers don't care about stuff. They care about services and functionality. So this is kind of a very good graphic of what we have with SHINES. We have some residential photovoltaic, about 5 kilowatts. We're doing this in conjunction with Pecan Street, which is a research kind of collaborative. We have some forecasting approaches here and some distributed resource optimization going on. SCADA is a utility term for supervisory control and data acquisition, but basically it's the software and the applications that let us know what's going on the network and allow us to control the network. But what's important about that is, again, 20 years ago, SCADA didn't contemplate things on the network that are on the network today. It didn't contemplate so much local solar. It didn't contemplate electric vehicles. It didn't contemplate battery racks and things of that nature. So that has to be included in that in the terms. Then we have some commercial components to it. We also have the utility grade solar, and all these things are integrated in this project to determine what is the right configuration, what's likely to happen. Now, one of the things, is I'm gonna end on a realistic note, it's not a sound note, there was a battery fire, I believe in Arizona. So batteries, and I'm optimistic about them, but they're still in their nascent stages. So we need to understand what causes these fires. And I just got finished talking to the executive who runs that. I was at a conference 2 days ago. This is a particularly unique fire because generally battery fires, the batteries burn to the ground and there's no batteries left. This battery pack didn't fully burn, so now they have this very large rack of batteries that they have to figure out how to discharge. But the upside is that because they didn't burn to the ground, it's going to allow them to do some forensics on what may have been the cause and things of that nature. So again, this concept, this notion is allowing us to explore and see what's possible, what do we need to tweak, what do we need to improve on, and this information, coupled with the things you all are doing, what the university is doing, and the service providers are doing, I think can help us as a community come up with better solutions. And that is the conclusion of my presentation.